The Battle of Austerlitz is one of the most famous battles that took place in Moravia. It pitted the French army, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, against the Allied army composed of Russian and Austrian troops. The fact that the battle took place in Moravia was not planned at all. Initially, Napoleon had intended to invade England, with which France had been at war since 1803. Bonaparte's actions had long provoked the anger and resentment of Tsar Alexander I. On March 30th, 1805, the Russian ruler signed an alliance treaty with Great Britain. Under diplomatic pressure, Austrian Emperor Francis I also joined, and on July 28, 1805, the Third Coalition was formed. To avoid a defensive war on multiple fronts, Napoleon decided to attack the nearest enemy, Austria, and then deal with the Russians. Starting in late August, the French army began marching across Europe. The first major clash occurred from October 16th to 19th against the army of Austrian General Mack near Ulm, Austria, where the French captured 60,000 Austrians. Meanwhile, Russian General Kutuzov, commander of the Russo-Austrian army, spent the nights of October 2 to 5 in the Dietrichstein Palace in Brno, where a memorial plaque is now placed. After Austria's defeat at Ulm and Napoleon's occupation of Vienna on November 13, 1805, the Allied forces retreated to Moravia and Brno. General Kutuzov wanted to continue retreating and avoid battle, aware of Napoleon's strength. However, younger and more ambitious generals convinced the Tsar that the Allies should attack Napoleon. As a result, Kutuzov was replaced in command by Tsar Alexander I, while Emperor Francis I of Austria had a smaller military role, but strengthened Austria's influence in decision-making. On Tuesday, November 19th, the French cavalry seized Brno in a matter of minutes. The following day, Emperor Napoleon entered the city in triumph. He chose the governor's palace as his temporary residence, which Austrian Emperor Francis I had hurriedly left on November 17th. As French troops gathered in Brno before the Battle of Austerlitz, provisions had to be secured for thousands of soldiers. The Zelny Trh Square turned into a slaughterhouse, with about 20 cattle butchered daily for the army. From November 21st onward, Napoleon and his entourage rode out daily to survey the battlefield southeast of Brno. He returned after dark, so he ordered residents to light their windows, which served not only as an aid to navigation and security, but also as a psychological display of control over the city. On the evening of November 28th, Napoleon met with his marshals at the Staroposhta Inn near Kovalovets. Meanwhile, the village of Austerlitz lay along the path of the Russian and Austrian troops assembling in Moravia for the decisive battle against Napoleon. On November 29th, Tsar Alexander I spent the night at the Austerlitz Chateau, while Emperor Francis I stayed in the neighboring estate administration building. On November 30th, both commanders arrived in Austerlitz, Slavkov, where they lodged in the luxurious Kaunitz family palace. By late November, the French army had begun moving closer to the battlefield. On the same day, Napoleon relocated to a gravel pit near Schlapanitz. In the late night hours of December 1st, 1805, the first shots of the Battle of Austerlitz were fired, when the vanguard of the Austrian First Column under Field Marshal Kienmeyer approached Telnice. The village changed hands several times between the Austrians and the French. By morning, part of the battlefield was shrouded in fog, and a red sun rose as the troops began marching. Napoleon was positioned at Huron Hill, while French artillery occupied Santon, a strategically advantageous position on the left flank of the Grand Army, where they faced Russian troops led by General Bagration. At the beginning of the battle, the Allies controlled the Pratzen Heights, a key elevation. Napoleon aimed to seize the heights and flank the enemy from the side and rear. Around 11 a.m., a fierce two-hour battle erupted near Pratzen Heights, and by noon, the French had captured the hill. To the east of the Stare Vinogradie Ridge, the elite units of both armies clashed, the French Imperial Guard against the Russian Imperial Guard. Around 1 p.m., Napoleon met with Marshal Soult's staff at a chapel on the hill above Uyezd near Brno. The fighting then shifted to the valley of the Zlati Potok, Golden Stream, where 3 Russian columns were attacked by French regiments. The Allies retreated across the frozen ponds, but only a small portion of their army made it to safety. At around 2 p.m., General Bagration initiated the Russian army's final retreat from Santon toward Ruzanov. The entire battlefield was covered with corpses. The French made use of flying ambulances, special wagons that provided first aid and transported the wounded to field hospitals. The main French hospital was in Schlapanitze, and if the wounded were stable enough, they were transferred to Brno. Even the Reduta Theater on Zelny Church Square was converted into a hospital. Near Santon Hill, Brigadier General Val Hubert of the French Army was severely wounded and later died at House No. 490, now Orly Street 14. He was buried in the then municipal cemetery in Brno, near today's Konikova Street. Count Ferdinand Tiesenhausen, the son-in-law of Marshal Kutuzov, also succumbed to his injuries. He served as the inspiration for the character of Prince Andrei Bolkonsky in the novel War and Peace. During the night of December 2nd to 3rd, 1805, the Austrian Emperor and the Russian Tsar stayed overnight in Zhoroshets. On December 3rd, 1805, Napoleon moved into the palace in Austerlitz, which his opponents had occupied before the battle. There, the emperor dictated his proclamation to the army and several letters to France. On December 4th, a meeting between Napoleon and Emperor Francis I took place on neutral ground near Spalany Mlyn, close to Nasedlovitz. There, an armistice was agreed upon between France and Austria. The peace negotiations continued in Brno, but due to a typhus epidemic, they had to be moved to Pressburg, today's Bratislava. The peace treaty was signed on December 26, 1805, in the Primate's Palace in Bratislava. Austria ceded part of its territory and recognized Napoleon's dominance in Europe. The Russian forces simply withdrew. As a result, Napoleon gained more influence in Germany and Italy, leading to a reorganization of borders and the creation of new states under French control. In the spring of 1809, Europe once again found itself in the turmoil of war. On April 9th, Austria, encouraged by British support, launched another conflict against France. However, the French army was weakened because its core forces had been fighting in Spain since 1808. With the help of England, Sicily, and Sardinia, Austria formed the Fifth Coalition against Napoleon. The war quickly moved to Bavarian territory. On May 13, 1809, Austrian defenses collapsed, and Vienna fell into Napoleon's hands. However, the French advance was halted in the bloody Battle of Aspern and Essling, where Napoleon suffered the first defeat of his career. Nevertheless, he did not give up, and by July 6th, he achieved victory in the Battle of Wagram, forcing the Austrians to retreat to Moravia. On July 10th, the Battle of Znojmo took place, where the Austrian army fought with great determination. However, the situation did not develop in its favor, leading to the Austrians surprisingly proposing an armistice. Aware of the enormous human and material losses, Napoleon agreed and declared, "Enough blood has been shed. It is time to make peace." French troops remained around Znojmo for 4 long months. The town and surrounding villages were plundered, and the population fell into deep misery. In mid-September 1809, Napoleon decided to visit Brno. From September 16 to 18, he stayed at the governor's palace, where he organized further political steps. During his stay, he toured the Spielberg fortress, rode through the city, and conducted a military parade on the battlefield near Austerlitz. In honor of his 40th birthday, French soldiers organized a grand celebration in Brno's Luzhanki Park, attended by the city's elite. Before his departure, Napoleon issued an order to demolish the fortifications of Spielberg Castle. Spielberg was a key military fortress defending Brno. He wanted to weaken the Austrian defenses and prevent its use against his army. On October 14, 1809, the Treaty of Schönbrunn was signed, marking a severe defeat for Austria. The country lost vast territories and was forced into an alliance with France for 4 years. This alliance was solidified in 1810 by Napoleon's marriage to the daughter of Austrian Emperor Francis I, Marie-Louise. However, the Napoleonic Wars had a dramatic conclusion. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, sealing his ultimate downfall. After the battle, he was forced to abdicate, and the British exiled him to the island of St. Helena. France returned to a monarchy, and Louis the Haut of the Bourbon dynasty ascended the throne. To commemorate the end of the Napoleonic Wars, an obelisk was erected in Brno in 1818 as a symbol of the end of wartime hardships. Its unveiling was a significant event. For the first time, the Austrian Crown Prince Ferdinand, later known as Ferdinand I the Benevolent, appeared in public. Also present was Prince Johann I of Liechtenstein, the former commander of the Austrian-Russian cavalry at the Battle of Austerlitz. Thus, the Napoleonic Wars not only marked the end of Napoleon's era, but also brought fundamental changes to Europe's political landscape.